Welcome to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Southwest Washington's #1 show for real estate news and information. Without further ado, here are your hosts and a couple of guys who, as busy realtors and successful brokerage owners, know a thing or two about real estate. Steve Nassar of Premier Property Group and Joe Fustolo of Soldera Properties. Well, hey, we're here. Let's talk. Let's do the show.
The band's back together. Tucker, you look good and rested. I imagine your golf game's a little bit better. You probably know how to surf by now, and you definitely look like you've been in the sun. So,
I do live in the tropics. I guess I'm going on. It'll be 2 years as of the end of the month. Well, beginning of January, right? So it's home now. It's not just a vacation away from home. But yeah, my golf game's still okay at best. I'm pretty good at pickleball.
I struggle believing that, Tucker. You're one of those guys that annoys the hell out of me because you're good at everything.
Good at everything.
Yeah,
you're a way better golfer than me, I'm sure. Golf is just one of those sports I enjoy being okay at, so I can just go out and drink beer.
Do you keep a handicap, Tucker?
No, and everybody here asks me that, and then that just kind of disqualifies me as like not a very good golfer because I don't have a registered handicap.
Do you keep a score every time you play?
Yeah, I'm like a bogey golfer. I'm okay. Usually,
90-ish, 90s.
Yeah, 90, 92 probably.
Yeah, okay. So you're probably around the 18 handicap.
Yeah, although that whole idea just seems weird to me, but either way, that's probably what I'd shoot. If I shoot in the low 90s, it's a good day. So,
yeah. So, well, for those of you who are not as familiar with Tucker, he was my original co-host. This podcast, the Portland Real Estate Podcast, was his brainchild way back in like 2015, which shows you how long this has been going. 9 years now. I remember Tucker reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I want to start a podcast and I think you'd be a good co-host, Steve." And I was like, "What's a podcast?"
That was really, really perceptive.
I was like, "Is that something off Star Trek? Like pod? Beam me up, Scotty." I don't know. What was it? And his exact definition was, he's like, "It's on-demand radio. It's the future. It's where you can record things and people can listen to them whenever, wherever, however." And I was like, okay. And so we started it, and it's evolved over the years. It started out as a true podcast, only disseminated as a podcast. And then along the way, gosh, back then we used Skype. Remember, Tucker?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I remember one of the things you helped me with, I'm changing gears slightly here. One of the things you helped me with, and maybe Joe too, right before the pandemic, it was like early 2020 or late 19, we were about to jump on one of these. I think it was going to be the Best of Masters. And you said, "Hey, forget Skype. I've got this new tool we're using. It's called Zoom." I was like, okay. And we did it. And I was like, this is better than Skype. And sure enough, 2 months later, when the pandemic hit, I kid you not, I immediately bought a Zoom account. And I told my team, all meetings, all communication is on this new platform. And so we were, well, everyone figured it out pretty quick, but we were right there ahead of the curve, slightly ahead of the curve because of it. So yeah, we started it on Skype. And man, back then, Tucker, we did like a weekly one, right? Mm-hmm. For a long time. We did once a week, and we were just trying to build an audience. And
I mean, do you remember how many, well, I don't want to bash realtors, but how many real estate people reached out to us and they're like, "I like your show, but I can only watch it when I'm sitting at my desktop computer." We were like, yeah. You don't have to watch it that way, but I'm glad you're watching. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now everybody gets it. They know how to do it.
And that's the beauty of it. And now everybody else does it. And there's so many other, but we've got that loyal brand because of that, right? We have that loyal following. And then along the way, I remember we would have regular guests, and we had everyone from Kurt Von Wasmuth to, gosh, we had Zillow guy one time. I mean, we had some pretty great guests along the way. And somewhere along the way, I told you, I was like, I know this Joe Fustolo guy. I've done a couple deals with him. He's got a Facebook group. I feel like it could be a compliment to what we're doing. And I wasn't sure how. I just knew we were both, running in the same circles of audiences, like real estate professionals. So I said, let's have lunch with him. That's how it started. And we went to Tavern on Cruise and we had lunch. And from that lunch was born the idea It kind of evolved a little bit, but basically the best of masters. Like, let's unite the two things. Maybe we can live. I don't think we were yet live streaming it there. That came a few years later, probably around the time of Zoom, to be honest. But we would do a podcast where we would talk about things on masters, and then we would promote it to the masters audience, and then, I mean, pretty soon Joe became a regular fixture on the show. Every few podcasts he'd be on. And from there, Joe evolved into saying, I think a turning point for Joe's went from being a regular guest to, almost like a co-host was when we had our 100th episode. He goes, I want to be on the 100th episode. And that was not a best of masters. We go, okay, let's do it. And so
that was a fun day. That was in your backyard, Tucker.
In Tucker's
That's
backyard.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back when I lived in a big old house and
next to a pool.
Wanted out of life. Yeah, in a pool.
Next to your swimming pool. Yeah. So we did the 100th episode. And then at that point, Joe would come on more and more, right? And there'd be more best of masters. And if there was a big guest, sometimes he'd jump on. And then somewhere along the way, Tucker, for reasons I'll let him clarify, he's like, I'm out of Oregon. I'm going somewhere else, somewhere sunnier and better. And so it was a natural fit for Joe to slide into your chair, and here we are.
I'm always a big fan of helping people with knowledge and new information and cutting edge stuff. And this year, particularly, we had some very timely announcements. The new Oregon Realtor forms. We had past President Jeff Wyron and Jeremy Rogers, the attorney that wrote those forms, on the day those forms were released, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after the NAR suit in Missouri, we had Jeremy Rogers, an attorney, talk about what that means to us. I mean, we've had some super timely stuff. And what I really love about it is in Masters, we cover some really good topics. But to fully answer the question, if you are writing pages and pages of stuff, nobody's going to read it. But what they will read isn't enough to really unpack it fully, which is why this is such a great platform. And I got to do a shout out to our subscribers. We have some of the smartest subscribers out there because they understand that you always need to be learning to stay relevant, right? So they listen to us and they are getting this stuff that people who don't listen may not necessarily know. But I want to go back and pay a little homage to Tucker, that how could you possibly know that a podcast was anything? Like August of 2015 was the first episode of Portland Real Estate Podcast. But back then it was just a bunch of adults sitting around recording themselves for no reason, right? Fast forward 9 years, it's a substantial thing. All the movie stars are doing it, and they all have podcasts as well.
Everybody has a podcast, yeah. But they don't all have an audience. And now it's so noisy in the podcast space. If you try to build an audience, it's much harder than somebody like us who started in 15 when there was no one competing with you. Now, the challenge in 15 was getting people to understand what a podcast was, how to download it, and what to do. But once you did that, you had a pretty good audience because there was no other real-time on-demand shows online.
Yeah, it was a new thing. I mean, I knew it would work, which is why I went and got Steve, and ultimately why we, brought you into it. It just happened to help that we all liked each other, right? And so that created synergy. And I've done a lot of podcasting now, so like I understand there's certain little bit of magic that goes into the ones that kind of stick or kind of propel themselves to the front of the line. And so part of our magic was we were at the beginning. The other part of it is that we had the three of us for a long time there that liked each other, that had good synergy, that had good conversation. And we were all in our own corners of the business, but a lot of people knew who we were as well. And then of course, Joe's got his group. So there was kind of a magical combination there, which is why it's sustained for 9 years. And you guys are still running with it and doing a great job now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. We did. We passed the torch because when you took off and left, my takeaway is, I'll never forget that Tucker, you started it, and you and Steve were the guys. And look, we have, real estate related professions, but, our professions are different. Our work style is different. Our companies are different. Everything's different. But the one thing that we are gathered here and we're committed to taking the time, spending the money, putting in the effort is to share this information with all of our peers out there. And that's the big thing. And that's where I got excited, is because a lot of the big topics run through masters first. And then if we do the podcast, we can just touch on those things and expand on them here and sort of give the people what they want, right? If people are kind of left wanting or it wasn't fully answered, here's the chance we can do that verbally versus trying to type it all out.
The analogy that comes to mind when I think about that is both serve a valuable purpose. And I'm talking about Facebook group Masters in Real Estate and the podcast. And to me, it's like, what's more important, a semi truck or a car, right? Well, what do you need to do? Do you want to deliver an envelope across town, or do you want to deliver a couch across town? I mean, and so like the Facebook group is awesome because you can get thousands of people talking, right? And you couldn't do that with a podcast, right? You could never have 1,000 people on here all chiming in. But those 1,000 people aren't going to be able to say much. They're going to get a little bite-sized amount in, and that's it. Whereas the podcast, you can only have a few people talking. In fact, I mean, we've gotten as many. We had our panel of female agents a couple times last year, and we had 5-6 people on, but that's about the cap of it, right? But you can say so much more, and you can really unpack things, and you can have a live conversation. You know what else I also like about it? I don't know if I've ever said this, but sometimes Masters is better than most groups. Man, there are some nasty groups out there, right? Some national ones where there's just so much cynicism and there's so much, almost bullying and chatter, and you can never say anything right. Whatever someone says, there's someone there to pick it apart. Podcasts are a little bit easier that way. In other words, it's really hard to go, if you have a 60-minute podcast, it's really hard to go and criticize, 30 seconds of something someone said. You can do it a little bit, but it's not commonly done, right? Unless you really go off the rails and say something crazy, which no one ever has. And that's another part of our magic, right? We're all pretty good on the air. No one ever said anything live, and we've done this live for a long time. They're like, "Whoa, delete! You can't delete."
There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there, and I think the overall feeling in Masters is, look, there's lots of real estate out there. We all collaborate with one another. Matter of fact, that's one of the headlines. We collaborate. We're not competition. I mean, yes, we are competition, but we're here to collaborate. And if a keyboard warrior jumps up and tries to blast somebody, they're voted off the island. And then, at least the group of masters is, we have no more problems. That person lost out, but we have no more problems. And so know the rules. We tell them 5 times. And then if you break the rules, you're out.
We had one recently. I posted, this is just a couple months ago. I posted, as the market rates were getting around 8% or even.
I think I read it, and it was.
And I posted something saying Joe nuked him. He said, "You're voted off the island. Get out of here."
Yeah, has nothing to do with Trump. It's just, it could have been a Biden post, a Trump post.
It's just wrong for him, dude. Wrong for him.
Nowhere. And then people are like, "Dude, you better take that down, or you're going to get booted." And I think he posted it again, and then I was going to give him a little bit of a break, but I nuked him, and no problem since then.
Yeah,
it keeps you on your toes.
It's dangerous territory up there to post something like that. You're in hot water real quick. Not necessarily.
Well, again, and it would have been the same result if it was the other side. It wasn't about who he was saying. It was just the fact that he wanted to politicize a market commentary.
Of course.
Come on, yeah.
But
well, wait till this coming year. We're going to see a lot of political speak. Keyboard
I think
warriors.
It'll be better. I think it'll be better because remember last time, COVID was such a screwy time, especially in Oregon and in the Northwest. But there was just a lot of really amped up people, and the only way you could communicate for a lot of people was via social media. So it funneled all positive, all negative through social media, which I don't think is going to be the case this next time around. So.
I don't know why I'm thinking of this analogy, but it's like if you take an ant farm. I promise I never did this when I was a kid, but if you take an ant farm, remember those old ant farms?
Yeah.
You shake it up.
Right. And hold a magnifying glass to it under the sun.
And they just all go crazy, right? First of all, for our listeners, I never did that, but I'm sure if you did that, that would be bad. That's what COVID did to people. It just brought out the most crazy. It just shook up all of society, and even people you didn't expect to be crazy became crazy. And Man, we'll be talking about that for decades, won't we? But yeah, I agree with that. And social media was where it came out, and yeah. And so to your point, Tucker, I think people were so confined because they were just in their homes and all on social media, and all they could do was communicate that way versus other things, which hopefully distracts them this time. Plus, hopefully this year or next year, it'll be been there, done that. If it's the same two candidates, what's the new material? Seriously, didn't you debate all this before? Hopefully, it's not going to be pretty and fun. I'll tell you that, but it's hopefully better. Well, let's talk about you, Tucker. What are you up to these days? Tell us about your journey.
So, obviously I left. I guess I'd be lying if I said my COVID experience didn't sort of push me along a little bit.
We know that. Yeah, we know that.
And there's some other things, and I've been back. I still own a house in Lake Oswego. I came back this summer, had lunch with Joe. Unfortunately, you were sick.
It was terrible timing. Yeah.
But either way, it would have been cool to get together. But me and Joe had lunch, and so I've been back and forth and whatnot. But I just, at the end of the day, I've always said this, and it wasn't like, the end of COVID was the thing that kicked this off. But I always said, I don't want to die in the rain. Right. And so, although, we get 2 to 3 great months a year there, there's no question. I mean, when I was back in end of July, it's amazing. But then it goes from amazing to dog shit real quick at times. And then when
die in a hurricane, maybe.
yeah. Well, there's that. And
we're going to ask you about that hurricane here in a second.
There's a Category 5 hurricane. So that made me a local, supposedly. So that was the tipping point there. But I wanted to move somewhere that I could enjoy the outside. I could swim in my pool year round. I could, it's 82 and sunny today. It's just a different life, right? And it's a different world. It feels like a different world too. But I just wanted to experience that. I wanted to kind of open up life a little more, right? Because it when you're in the Northwest, sometimes you're in this little sliver of the world, and I got to the point where I wanted to experience a little bit more. And so did my wife, of course. So we decided to do it. It wasn't an easy task, and it took a lot of planning and unraveling and, closing out projects, paying off debt, doing all kinds of things that you got to do when you unravel a 20-year-old business, especially in real estate and the home building world. So it was a big thing. I think now, I'm sitting in my office here in Naples. It's about 3 minutes from my house. So I pretty much recreated what I had with my office in Lake Oswego and my house here in Naples, which is cool. But I just wanted to change. I wanted to change of weather. I wanted to change of pace in terms of lifestyle.
Didn't you say at one point that, forgive me if you didn't want this on the air, but didn't you at one point say Naples makes Lake Oswego look like it's on food stamps?
It does. And that was...
Which, I mean, and there's nothing, you weren't knocking Lake Oswego. You were just like, this is like yachts in the backyard next level, right?
Yeah, it's like literally, if I stand outside my office every 7 minutes is a, private jet flying in, flying out, right? Like that's, we had one person that bought one of our houses over the years that flew in on their own private jet with their family to come see the house and then would check in on it. Like that was an anomaly. It pretty much never happened, right? Here it's like the norm. So it's just different in that way too. So like price points here are significantly higher in certain neighborhoods, and other neighborhoods, not so much, but the top of the mountain here is way higher than it is there. No question. I mean, you're $35 million for a single family home here versus, let's call it 10 to 12 if you're on the lake and it's a friggin' island.
And that's a rare one, right? There's only
it's an anomaly, right? So there's just a lot more upward mobility for us there. It also opened up, a whole nother world that over the last 2 years I've really built out on top of our home building business that I've restarted is a hospitality business. So now we have a sizable rental portfolio of vacation rentals. And so we run that, and I built that out, and it flows really well, and it's working out. And so, that's a whole nother side of the business that I had rental portfolio in Portland area and Lake Oswego, but I never ran them as vacation rentals. They were all long-term rentals, which is a completely different business.
Do they not have the tight reins on that like they do everywhere around here?
They understand that so like, here's what I've concluded about the Portland area, right? So like I have my house there. People come and stay at that. Usually it's like mid-term renters, they're there for a month or, 2 months, something like that. But most people come to visit Portland in the summertime, and they come for a family reunion or a wedding, right? Or to see family. Outside of that, not a whole lot of visitors. Here, you get visitors year round from all over the world. So it's like a mecca for travel, and people come here to drop a shitload of money and make great memories, right? That's what they do. Not nearly as many people do that when they come to Portland, right? They're coming there for family vacation or, family wedding, whatever it is. So there's just a lot more money pumping into here for, obvious reasons for the world of hospitality. And so they pay a lot more too. So like, for example, one of the houses that we're renting right now, we built two next to each other right by the beach. One of them, I've got it booked out for all of the next, 4 months. On the high side, we're getting $1,200 a night. On the low side, we're getting $1,000 a night over that course of that time. So it's just, it would be pretty hard to get those numbers anywhere in the Portland area on any sort of.
So neighbors are cool with it being a transitory house with people coming and going, maybe partying, and that, because that's where we get there's a lot of HOAs and cities around here that have really clamped down on that.
Now, I mean, here's what I'll say about that, because I underwrite everybody that stays at our houses pretty hard.
Sure, of course.
Run a good business. The problem isn't necessarily with the vacation rentals. The problem is the fact that industry as a whole has a lot of idiots that never ran long-term rentals, that got into it, that overpaid and over-leveraged to buy a short-term rental, and then they put anybody and everybody in it that they can so that they can service their debt and hopefully make a few bucks at the end of the day, right? And so I think that'll eventually work itself out as these kind of, let's call them, lesser operators kind of get shaken out of the business, which is kind of happening right now. But in general, to answer your question, you have different areas here. So like the neighborhood that I live in, which is just across the road here from the office, there aren't any vacation rentals in that neighborhood because it's a full-timer neighborhood, right? And then you have, as you get closer to the beach, you have certain pockets that are, maybe like half full-timer, half vacation type people. So when you get into those types of neighborhoods, people just accept it, that's what it is. And most people run their vacation rentals pretty well here because it's a fairly robust business here. Whereas it's not just ma and pa or some dude that owns a, house that he's trying to run as a short-term rental.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
And that pays probably 3x more than someone who rents a place for a year, doesn't it?
Yeah, probably 3 to 4x is what I've seen.
Yeah. Great.
How many do you have, Tucker?
We've got 6 of them that we're running.
Are you flipping or building and selling at all?
I have one that we're building that we built and it's on the market to sell right now. And we have another one that we're renovating to sell right now.
Okay. So you are doing some of the old school stuff that you did.
Not as much though, because it's been an uphill battle. So
what's the uphill battle?
I guess that's the big elephant in the room, right? The market's been,
gotcha. Yes.
across the country at different points in time over the last, year and a half.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. How's your market compared to ours in that regards? Is it better, worse, same?
I think they're the same, but they just are the same at different times, right? Like markets seem to they all get to the same places, but they don't get there at the exact same time. That's the thing that I've realized about here. The other thing too is that the acceleration and the deceleration are much faster and much more vigorous on both sides, right? So like you can have a $200,000 to $300,000 swing on a house in the matter of a month here, right? Just based on the amount of buyers in the market, right? Because it goes like this, and so it's kind of like, buckle up, hope you got your stomach, you got a strong stomach when you're building or you're anything spec here, because that's just, you can kill it, but you can also, it can really wear on your nerves quite a bit as well. So it's kind of one of these types of markets. And so I think by having the rental portfolio and running kind of the hospitality side, it just evens out my mental well-being, and it also evens out the business a little bit. So we're not on this giant roller coaster for everything that we do.
How many would you say you've sold, Tucker, since you've been there? Just roughly.
We've sold 3.
3 houses? Okay.
Yeah.
And has it been a challenge to find subs?
That's been a challenge. I will say it's very different. The one thing about Florida that I always say is that everybody's got a hustle, but not every hustle is a good one. And so that extends into the world of subcontractors as well. And the challenge there, the real big challenge and how that relates is that, when you have a big percentage of the market here that is like $10 million to $30 million homes, right? You then get a distorted view of what people will pay for services rendered. And so when you go to work on a normal $4 million house, let's say, and they want to charge $30 million house prices, then you've got a margin problem if you're a builder, right? Or if you haven't been here for a while. So it took us a good while to kind of get through all of the people that were just looking to try and make as much money on you as quick as they can, and that's all they care about.
Because they didn't know you. Part of it is because they didn't know you. Whereas
part of it is
you had
culture,
a loyal,
right?
yeah.
Because Florida is very transitory in terms of the sub base, because you get a lot of people that come here to work, and a lot of those people, they're foreign, right? And just culturally, they just try and make as much as they can as quick as they can before they might, get out of Dodge or whatever.
Yeah.
So we've managed to kind of sift through that. That was probably the hardest part. And now we've found a good core base of subs that, ironically, a good chunk of them all came from Oregon or Vancouver as well. I've met them either randomly or through people that I knew that came here. And so we have a good chunk of those that were all Northwest original people that then moved down here to Southwest Florida as well.
That's awesome.
They got tired of the zoning requirements too, probably.
You know what? I haven't had one person come out and yell at me about cutting a tree since I've been here, and it's amazing. Let me tell you.
So trees are fair game there, Tucker.
Trees are fair game.
You even have to ask the city or the ordinance. No, you just cut it down. Yeah.
Busted out the chainsaw the other day and cut down one that was right where I'm putting a pool, and nobody said a word. And actually, when I bought that house too, this never happened in Portland. It's like a family that had owned the house for generations, and it was like turned into a party house for the last 10 years. And it's like your classic crappy house we buy and renovate, right? And after the guy that lived there, his name was Randy, real loud guy, didn't wear a shirt, tattooed. They said he ran a coke house out of there for years too. So very like party centric house with probably some questionable characters coming and going all the time. On the last day, when I shook his hand and he left, and whatever, the neighbor comes over and he gave me a hug. He goes, "We're throwing a barbecue in your honor this weekend for getting him out of here and turning the house over." And I was like, you know what? That's the way it's supposed to be. Not, people mean mugging you or eyeballing you or looking to turn you in or, call the city for whatever reason.
Did you tear down the house and build a new one, or you're just remodeling?
That one remodeling for various reasons. But we bought it for sub dirt price, so we could have tore it down too.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you living in the same house that you showed me and Joe? Are you in the same place that you moved to? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Same house.
And the irony of the neighbor who's a pain in your ass, who he's cutting down a tree and he's getting mud in the street and like all of these things, they report it all. And you have to go through all the red tape and all the meetings. And then eventually you build it. And then all the neighbors are like, "Hey, that place is great. I wonder how much my house appreciated." Right? Isn't that ironic? It's the same old model every single time.
I'll be totally honest with you, Joe. That wore on me so much. I felt like I was wearing like battle armor every single day. And honestly, I think it affected my overall, I know it affected my overall quality of life and happiness, because I was just a battering ram every day dealing with the biggest assholes that you could possibly find. And as a builder, you're a magnet to those assholes in the Northwest. And it's the reality of life there. It's what it is. And so I'm happy. I mean, there's still some of that. Don't get me wrong. It's not like that's completely non-existent, but it's way watered down. I still don't know the complete reason for that, but that's why I guess I say it feels like a different world, right? In a lot of ways. And that's one of them.
So I listened to your podcast, The Journey, and that was your journey of giving up, multi-million-dollar business here and then moving there on sort of a whim. And I don't think I've ever said it out loud, but I knew that you would make it there because the model is unbeatable. You and your wife are amazing about buying things right and understanding trends. And we were talking about, buy things on first base or third base and understanding the trends, and you build one hell of a product. I think the only thing that changed is instead of like build and sell or rehab and sell, there's maybe even a more profitable model of rehab and keep. And if you're getting 3 to 4x, then when you decide to punch the time clock for the last time and you have a stream of thousands of dollars a month, you're just walking to the mailbox. That's your passive income. I knew it would work. Are you continuing the journey? Are you doing season 2 of that podcast?
I may, but I'll be totally honest. It was a different style, which, it was very time intensive to do. And so at a certain point, I committed to doing it and I did it, but it's like at the same time, I have to rebuild this whole business here, right? And now it's like a multifaceted business. And so I had to kind of make the choice of like, okay, well, do I want to double down in like, we'll call it the influencer content creation space, or do I want to double down on actually rebuilding this real business first? And so I had to kind of step back and rebuild this business first, which it's working out. It's going well, but there's only so many of you, right? And there's only so much that you can do every day effectively. And so that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I think moving forward, I've got plans, but I wanted to kind of get a good footing under me and kind of get the business going and flourishing again. And once I get there, then I've got more to share, right? And I've got more time, and I'm not, in the trenches every day,
You're not doing an active podcast right now, Tucker? No active podcast or anything like that?
No, we're the first one that I started before you and I got together, Steve. I'm going to do a last chapter on that one starting at the beginning of 2024. But it's a little easier. We just grab a microphone, I talk into it sort of like this, right? This is pretty simple for everybody too.
Yeah. Can I ask Tucker 2 questions?
You betcha.
Because I really am fascinated by his story. Hey, are the code requirements to build houses a lot different there? And did you have to get used to those because of hurricanes?
Yeah. So here we build bomb shelters. That's what they are. If it's wood framed, nobody wants it because you've got, termites and bugs and hurricanes and things like that. So basically you build on slab where you have a crawl space in the Northwest, right? You pour your foundation and then you've got a crawl space underneath and then you wood frame the house. Here, you do your site work, you compact the site, you pour a slab, and then you do block walls all the way up. And then they stick rebar in the block, and then they backfill it with like a slurry. So literally like an atomic bomb could go off. And if you're hanging out on your couch, you probably don't even know it. So it's kind of crazy. But the reason why
are windows different?
Windows are different. So they don't have to be impact rated, but if they're not, then you have to put up hurricane shutters. So basically every new product has hurricane impact rated windows. And you have to get these little codes that apply to everything on the outside of the house that says that they're hurricane rated. And so the front end permitting part of the process is rather difficult because you have to, counties and the cities and the municipalities have to make sure that everything you're putting on that house is hurricane rated, right? And so it can hold up to, we have to adhere to Miami-Dade County hurricane requirements, which is like 165 mile an hour winds, even though Cat 5 is 176, I think, but they build stuff to withstand up to 165.
So that took some getting used to, right? Because that's cost that you're not used to, right? You had to kind of figure out like, oh, what's it going to cost to build this? And there's a little trial and error there, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, that and just like, what is it going to cost to build, right? So like, I was off by a couple $100,000 on each house we built, but now I know, right?
Yeah. So, insurance is tricky too, right?
Insurance is tricky. Having gone through Hurricane Ian last year, which was a Cat 5 right before it made landfall just north of us here, insurance was fairly cheap. It wasn't that much more. It was probably 2x what it was, in the Northwest. But then once that came through and just destroyed, I mean, even Fort Myers Beach, which is, just north of here, it won't be right for probably another 5 years, honestly. But once that went through and all of that destruction happened, the insurance rates jumped quite a bit. Now you could still, at the end of the day, things still sell, but it's just more expensive. Like for example, just on a typical rental property, one that I own that would be there, my annual insurance premium for, normal, fire, water, theft, whatever is probably going to be in like the maybe 1,100 a year range.
You're talking about Lake Oswego right now?
Yeah, Lake Oswego.
Yeah.
That same one is probably at a minimum like 6,400 a year here. So
yeah, that's insane. Yeah, but I get it. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, so a couple things. I wanted to ask about Hurricane Ian. I wanted you to announce what we found out from the feds 40 minutes ago, because that's very timely. And then I wanted to kind of like go through 2023. I remember I called you on Hurricane Ian and I'm like, dude, are you alive? I was watching TV and it was like a King Kong movie where King Kong picks up cars and throws them at helicopters and shit's going everywhere. And it's mayhem. Like you're on the news. They don't post like boring stuff of a 2-foot puddle. I mean, they have like buses floating down the river and houses on fire and flooded at the same time. And
the newscasters always crack me up in those hurricanes. They get out there and the wind's blowing them and they're talking and they just love that. There's a whole drama to that component. What did you do? Did you just stay at home and did you board up your windows and ride it out there?
We did, but it got weird because you guys were watching all that, right? And so were my parents. But our cell service got killed the night before. or that morning of, our internet got killed
because of the storm or something else.
Yeah, because of the storm.
Okay.
So we had no cell service, no internet, no TV. So eventually,
so you don't know what's going on.
I had no. I felt like I was in a black box of like, what the hell's going on? And so by about 2:00 the day that the hurricane hit, which it was still, it made landfall maybe an hour before that, something like that, 2 hours before that. I was like, I got to go see like what's going on, because we were halfway through a few projects, and I was like, I just can't sit here anymore and just hope that everything's all right. So I got in our big truck and I drove around, and there was water up to it's a big, Ford truck. It was, water across all the major roads. The neighborhood just to the west of us flooded out. Fortunately, the projects that we had, I learned really quick that the X zone means something very important here, which is basically a non-flood zone. They've got enough elevation that it's, at 500 years or more flood level. And so, nobody cared about that until Ian hit. Now they care about it, right? So I got lucky. There was one house I thought was going to get eaten by the water. I had, towels I was rolling up, putting against the back slider and some other stuff. And fortunately, right before it got to the house, the tide started to go out and the water started to recede a little bit from all the inner waterways and whatnot. But yeah, it was gnarly. And you're right, Joe. There was cars. I drove by a Toyota dealership on the way up to one of the projects. Cars were floating out into the highway. They were floating down into the mangroves. It was crazy. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen by far.
Do they kill the power there before it hits just for fire prevention, or it just got knocked out by the hurricane?
I don't know. I think they probably killed some of it, but a lot of it got knocked out. But I'll tell you what, they had Florida Power and Light. They had like 10,000 linemen or something up and cranking. And so, they got it put back together, the power anyway, as quickly as possible. But it was a crazy experience. There was, I had one buddy that was on Barefoot Beach, which is just to the west of us here. And it's like this little peninsula. And at the end of it is a public beach. And there's these condo towers that sit right on the beach right there. And he was on the second or third floor, and he sent me a video. He's like, I think I'm going to die. It was nice knowing you. And it showed the water coming up and all the cars were getting washed out of the parking garage underneath. And he had his family there and he can't leave because there was just so much water, and you're just hoping that the building doesn't collapse. But, fast forward a year plus later, a lot of these buildings are still, they don't know if they should be condemned or not, or if they can be repaired because, the footings got so disrupted from all the water coming through, and it's just just a big mess. So thankfully he's okay, but it was crazy. It was nuts.
Did you know anyone that had a horrific something, whether it's injury or their house completely wiped out? I mean, you probably,
there were a lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people. There was, the unofficial death toll was higher than Katrina, but they didn't put it out because they're still missing. But it was crazy. It was craziest experience I've ever been through. I'm fortunate to have made it through the other side, but now
is it pretty cleaned up now? I mean, is everything, or do you still go by some areas and there's still
some areas are still like Fort Myers Beach? It's going to be 5 years before. I mean, it got decimated, and the problem there is that it's like if you took an infill area, right? Like let's say you took First Edition, and let's say a big wave came through and it trashed everything, right? All the houses got trashed. There's going to be few people that try and put it back together and live there, but most of them are just sit there as shells or scraped, or
because they don't want to be surrounded by that. They don't want to fix
it. And then they're
theirs,
dealing with insurance.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for developers to come in and rebuild it all, every single property is an individual property owner sale. You can't just go in and buy the whole, block. You can't do it. So it just takes time to be able to do that with everybody. So that's the big hinge pin there on time to allow this stuff to happen.
I wonder if there's an opportunity for a guy like you in that. Is there? I mean, is that a whole market like of rebuilds?
Yeah, there is, but I've thought about it. But at the same time, it's like it's a long money play. Like it's at what point?
Because if you're the first one rebuilding something, who wants to buy it and look at all the wreckage around?
Right, and who wants to rent it for a lot of money? Because there's no services really up there either. I mean, they did open Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville hotel, restaurant, whatnot up there, but that's the only thing that's open on Fort Myers Beach really at this point.
Yeah. Real quick question. Do you miss snow? Do you miss like any of the Four Seasons components? I know you don't miss the rain every day, but do you ever because correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty mild there year round. I mean, you're 82 today. What are you in the summer? Is it around the same or is it a lot warmer?
I mean, summertime's people most people that live here for, let's say they snowbird, they call it, they leave from like, end of May until September because they say it's too hot, too humid, whatever. I actually really love the summers here because it feels like a college town in the summertime. Everybody leaves. You can go wherever you want, whenever you want with no traffic. It's like a relaxed Jimmy Buffett lifestyle where everybody's partying and hanging out. And, it feels like Christmas break all summer. Pretty
Is
much.
it like
Great.
90s, but it's really
Yeah, we get to like 92. That's about what it is. But
it's
but
that
I'll tell you
wet
this.
heat, right?
Yeah, it's humid for sure.
Yeah.
But it's hotter and more humid in Charleston and Savannah than it is here, which I didn't realize until I went up there last summer and checked it out. But
Yeah.
And then
it's up to like 95 there, but the humidity is the same. So that 3-degree difference in temperature makes a big difference in how it feels.
And you have gators everywhere and like bugs that could like pick up small children. Isn't that correct?
There's mosquitoes and there are a lot of gators, but not a whole lot of big bugs.
Not big bugs.
Pythons, snakes, but they're trying to eradicate those. So
do you miss any of at times, do you miss the other weather?
yeah, snow, like I went to Big Sky, Montana last winter for a week and went snowmobiling and snowboarding. And I'm going to go to Breckenridge in February. And I think in January, I'm going to meet some other guys out in Keystone area, Colorado. So like I'll get my snow fix. What I don't miss is 40 anything and raining ever again.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason anybody should miss that. So.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I think I got my questions out. If I have others, I'll chime in with them. That was great, Tucker. It's good to catch up with you on all that stuff.
So, Tucker, before we went live on the air, something was just announced by the Fed. And do you want to tell our listeners who might not have heard it what was announced?
Yeah, and this is interesting because I'm just pulling it up right now to make sure nothing changed. But so everybody was waiting, to see what the Fed was going to do today. They didn't think that they would raise rates again, but the big question was just whether they would concede to lowering them as we head into 2024. And it looks like they said not only are they going to not raise them, but there are multiple rate cuts on the horizon for 2024, which leaves the door open for, is that 3? Is that 6? What is it, right? We don't know, but I think it's important because it's kind of the inflection point of uncertainty. Because, let's be honest, I think a lot of people were sitting on the sideline because they can't see the end of the tunnel, right? And, part of it is affordability and rates, but part of it is, well, if things just get worse, prices are going to compress more, and I don't want to be the sucker that buys today when I can buy next year, right? And so I think by getting to this point where, everybody agrees that rates should go down next year in some way, I think it's great for the market. I think it's a good thing.
I think it's awesome. It's big. It's huge. It's huge. I would even say conversely, Tucker, from our experience, maybe the best deals happened a month ago, right? Right before this. Now that you see the tunnel, guess who else sees the end of the tunnel? The seller. And he's like, well, I was pretty desperate a month ago. I really needed to move. I needed to unload that place. Now, maybe if it doesn't sell with you, maybe, next month or the month after would be better, right? Versus not seeing the end of the tunnel. So yeah, but it's all positive, My gosh, I'm ready for some good news. I think everybody in our business is ready for some good news. I can't believe, Tucker, how few transactions there have been this year nationally. I saw something yesterday that said it's even, and I'm not talking prices. We all know that home prices have held fairly steady, right? We're down a little bit in Portland. I don't know what you're like there.
Same. We just got into it at a different point.
But the transaction count is lower than anything during the Great Recession. I heard yesterday, basically they're projecting something like 3.9 million units sold in 2023. The last time there was that few units sold was like 1993. And the only reason it was 1993, it wasn't because my understanding is it wasn't because there was some crazy situation, even though there might have been a little bit of one. It's also just population and housing units out there. So, in a lot of ways, this was worse for us. It's not worse for our consumers. It's not worse for our clients. They had it far worse in 08, 09, 10, because they lost so much equity and value in those because of the foreclosures. But for us in the business who make a little commission or piece of the action on any transaction, whether it's mortgage lenders, title, realtors, builders, we make our money when something sells, right? I mean, we've been basically in a transaction recession for a while, and we still are, but maybe this is the inflection point. And it felt to me like October, November is when it really, really was, the darkest. Yeah. Everything just felt locked up and, with few exceptions, they were on the sidelines. They weren't interested in being in the market unless they just had some dire need. But it's nice to think, even though it's going to take a while. No, I don't think anyone thinks that we're, going to be in a red hot rolling market next week or next month. But wouldn't it be great to be in an environment where every month is a little bit better than the last, or at least not a way worse, right?
Well, this is predictable because anytime there's a campaign year, the economy can be manipulated so rates are better. And we knew there would be an improvement. At least I suspected so. And I thought there would be a lot of little snippets, 2 or 3 or 4 little reductions to be an extra push for POTUS who's in office now. But I think the rates don't have to go down too much to really kind of kick up the demand again. At 8.15% interest rate, it was a killer. But
it broke the back of the market.
But
the market
7%, people are back on their horse again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
us agents and us in the business that are pretty good at what we do, we don't need the red hot rolling market, but we don't need a locked up market. That's not good for anyone. I mean, right. So yeah, the spigot closed at 8%. And as it gets below 8%, it gradually opens. And there's somewhere around 7. I predict, actually, we started today with rates like 709, like the average mortgage daily news. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of today we have a 6 handle on mortgage rates, and like 699 or 698 or something, because
the 10-year dropped today.
Yeah, the 10-year dropped like a rock. The 10-year Treasury, which mortgage rates are very closely tied to. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good thing. I feel like, I mean, the three of us and probably a lot of people listening have endured, it's been challenging, right? And so to kind of get to this point, it just allows you to plan, right? Like you're not in that I don't know land anymore. I mean, we're still in I don't know land, but at least we know which direction we're headed overall. When we get there, who knows? But, the thing that's interesting to me, though, and I've been thinking about this for a while, is that, like, let's say rates go down, right? And people enter the market, or buyers get back off the sidelines and they enter the market. And generally what that does, especially with lower inventory, which I know it's bumped up there a little bit, but it's still low, historically. I wouldn't say, what was it, 3.5 months or something on your latest report there? Does that sound right? Yeah,
we're at 3.5 months inventory here. Yes.
So, I think anything under 4 months is still considered pretty low in today's world to me. But
it's the highest it's been since what, 12 or 11 or 13 or something. It's
something like that. But it's still, it's a pretty low number. I'd say if it gets to 4.5, 5, it'll probably feel like there's a lot more houses on the market. But, when those people come back in and they start buying because interest rates are going down and we feel like we're at the end of this tunnel, is it really a trade-off on affordability? Like, are they going to pay a little higher price for stuff and take a little lower debt service to really end up about the same as if they had bought last month or sometime earlier this month, but psyche-wise, they feel better about it, so they're willing to take it on? I don't know. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on that, because I feel like it's this little teeter-totter game of buyer psyche that is really getting played, and not so much, we'll call it affordability, because I don't think rates are going to move to the extent that it makes a dramatic impact on affordability.
We had Rob Levy on last month, and he said that the 4 recessions that he lived through, prices only went down in one of them, significantly. So I really do think that if the rates go down, I think the prices will hold. We got to really look at it. Like, the prices today compared to a year ago or 18 months ago, they aren't the same, because you would list something and they would sell for $175,000 over list price. Today, we see multiple price reductions before something finally sticks. So we'd be sticking our head in the sand if we didn't say that what homes sell for now are not what they were selling for 18 months ago or 12 months ago.
No, I agree with that, Joe. I agree with that. And remember, part of that too is we were in a rising environment for a couple of years, right? Dramatically rising. So if the market was going up 10% year over year, like say in 21, and now we're going down 3%, that's a 13-point swing, right? It's not just it's not just that we lost 3%, it's also we lost what we were gaining. So, absolutely, prices are down, but the data reads a little differently with that. Was your question, Tucker, is there a big difference between 8 and 7, or is it all psychological? Was that what your
question? I think
question?
the difference between 8 and 7 or 8 and 6 3/4 is psychological.
Little bit. Yeah. But I would say there has to be a number. There has to be that breaks the back of the market, right? I mean,
7.5 and above broke the back, right?
Yeah. And if I was going to exaggerate, I'd say, no one's going to sit here on this podcast and go, yeah, if mortgage rates were 50%, I'm sure somebody's going to, a lot of people are buying the houses. No, we know that. That's an exaggerated number. So obviously that's an exaggerated number. What is the number where it really diminishes? And it felt like it was around 8. Part of it too, I think when they're going up really fast, it shocks the market and people stop shopping. And part of that is just a protective mode. I think people go into a hibernation. We experienced it in August and September. Rates just started climbing from like the high 6s to 8, eventually to get to 8. And even as they were going up, even as they were like a 7.25 and 7.5, but they were just going up so fast that I don't think people want to go out with their realtor, look at houses, and start on Monday looking at houses. And by the time they find it on Friday, the rates are 0.5% higher. So they just kind of check out of the market when they're going up that fast. And I think that would happen. If there were 5 climbing dramatically to 6 or 7, right? The same concept. So it's a little bit about
maybe, but if we looked at a chart of like the initial climb from like 3.5 to 5.5, that was a pretty quick, as well.
And there was a little bit of a dead cat bounce there where people were just trying to grab a rate before because they knew what was coming. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, there's some merit to what you're saying for sure. I think as they get higher, people get more like.
There is a psychological component for sure too. There is a psychological where they think they could go back up to 8 or whatever the case. They just know this is improved over. It's always beneficial to have what is out there today look better than what it looked like a month ago, right? I mean, that's always beneficial. The opposite is super problematic, right? Where somebody looked at something a month ago, was thinking about it, and now they look again and they're like, well, gosh, that's worse than it. The payment is worse or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I'll take it. It has been a challenging year. Ultimately, I know lots of people in our business that are down 30, 40% on their production, which is what okay. So remember that number I put out, I said, the U.S. has 3.9 million units are predicted to close in 2023. 2021 was like 6.1 million. 22 was a little bit less than that. I think it was around maybe 5 some million, low 5s or something. But I mean, that's a 50% drop in transactions. So if someone's business is down, 30, 40%, they're maybe even better than average, right? My business, fortunately, we're ending up about even with what we did in 21 and 22, but it has not been a picnic. I mean, in 21, if you listed 100 houses, you pretty much sold 100 houses. In this year, there's a lot of nice houses we unlisted. We spent lots of effort, lots of marketing. Ended up the seller's just like, nah, I'm just going to pull it off, keep it for a while or rent it or whatever. And there's things that worked before. And you said this, Tucker, right? I mean, things that worked before don't work the same way today. And so you're just in flux. You're constantly on your toes trying to figure out like, what's the business model? Like you're used to an environment where like, if I put this widget into the machine, out pops out, money, right?
Yeah, basically.
Now
right?
you put the widget in the machine and you got to tweak. I mean, it's just like everything's different. You got to tweak it differently, and it doesn't work the same way. So it's stressful. It's problematic. Anytime the tide is receding, and that's what we were in. We were in an environment where in 21 there was 6 million plus homes sold in this country. 22 is less. 23 is even less, far less. So the tide is receding. So you don't know where the goalposts are. You don't know if I do X, it used to have this result. Now it's going to have a different result. And a month later, it's going to have even a different result. So it will be so refreshing. We will all be energized in this business when that tide starts coming back our way. Meaning things that didn't work last month might work this month. Things that worked kind of a little bit last month really work this month, right? What a great switch that'll be when the tide recedes and more transactions are happening. And I'm hopeful that we're about to, turn that corner.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
And I want to do a couple things. We've gotten caught up on Tucker, but Steve, you've had some changes with you and your company. And do you want to talk about ownership change or anything like that?
Sure. So earlier this year, by no desire of our own, there was just some forced change with a partnership. A statement was made by the company. Jeff Wyron put out a well-crafted statement on behalf of the owners that, one of the partners there was an incident and cause that occurred that we were, trying to work with them on and understand the ramifications and how it was going to affect the company. And ultimately, that was not a productive process. And actually, it kind of got even worse in other areas with other things and challenges that were occurring. And so the decision was made like, look, it's probably best if you're not owners anymore. So let's try to figure out a smooth transition of ownership that's fair for all. But that was not well received either. So, the majority of owners had to make a decision, and under the guidance of some really good legal advice, they did have to, remove them as partners. And they took to social media and, made a lot of false allegations, unfortunately, and a lot of drama. But that has seemed to have quieted down, and we're behind the scenes trying, doing what needs to be done to protect the company, which is in great hands, and has not lost money yet, even despite the challenging market, and has lots of money in the bank and reserves, and it has good strong footing, and so yeah, it's been interesting. It's been interesting for sure. It's nothing anyone wanted or planned, but a lot of things in life work that way, right? So
it was interesting to kind of clear the air because, I mean, I'm third party to everything. I, grab my popcorn, and I know. So the original owners were the Yawks, Kelly and Lori Joe, and they were pretty vocal on social media. And then the new ownership was like media silence. And so it was kind of out there for everybody, unfortunately. But it sounds like you had a transition where they got bought out, and then the ownership change is you and
Sarah Johnston and Jeremy Parks. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Sarah and Jeremy were married at one time, and they went through a very amicable divorce years ago. And so they were both minority partners. I had the same ownership as the Yawks. And so it's now the Yawks are no longer owners, and we've absorbed all their ownership shares. Yeah. So there is not a new owner, and the company is not for sale, nor will it be for sale. It's in very strong footing. And I'm the type, and I know I speak for my other partners as well. We're the type that, even though this isn't what we wanted or planned, when lemons are thrown at us, we're going to make lemonade. We're going to figure out like, okay, how do we make this a positive thing? And we already see it, through and throughout that we're going to, enter a golden era where there's a new energy, a new synergy, a younger, vibrant culture that's going to thrive. That's going to thrive for the company. And so,
and then for the people who don't own companies, it might be important to mention that on their way out, then you defer to your
operating agreement,
operating agreement,
or bylaws,
so your buy-sell agreement.
Yeah.
So they're getting paid.
Yeah.
Per the agreement. So nobody's doing anything underhanded. They're
oh my gosh, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's very well defined. It's very well defined.
That's why you have an operating agreement.
Yep,
right?
yep, yeah.
Let's face it, partnerships ain't easy, right? They're just not. And so they start off that way usually, but they don't usually end that way. And most partnerships, I've always said, end up being sinking ships. So if you can figure out how to just dismantle it without it sinking, then you're doing a great job, because they're all going to end or go different directions at some point, right? So you got to have the rules written on how that works before there's a lot of money at stake, because then people get crazy and angry and they start doing, all kinds of nutty stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that I was just a bystander to it, but I saw a lot of stuff online. It was like, somebody's getting screwed really bad. It's like, no, I remember I had a conversation with somebody. I was like, I guarantee they're going to get whatever they deserve, because there's an operating agreement and that's how you have to dismantle a company. So, let's not freak out and think that somebody just got thrown under the bus and backed over 5 times. It's just not the way it works. And if they did get an attorney and they get paid that way, right? So,
yep. Yeah. And the operating agreement just simply stated that there was a process of getting a valuation for a company that is fair to both sides through an independent third-party appraiser. And then over the course of 5 years, equal payments are made for that amount to the prior owners. And that's how it would have been if I left the company voluntarily or involuntarily. That's how it would have been if Sarah, that's just, that's how it's treated. So.
And that has to be a well-written operating agreement. It's kind of like insurance. Insurance covers every scenario. And you think it's impossible that the scenario could be infinity. But it's like, hey, this is what we cover if your house burns down, or if your house floods, or, you have black mold, or a hurricane picks up a herd of cattle and throws it through your house. That's covered too. And in insurance, they call that an act of God. But you have to be covered in absolutely every scenario. So when the partnership doesn't last anymore, you defer to the paperwork. Okay, now what do we do? Oh, these 3 people do evaluations on what it's worth. We take the average and they get paid. So I thought that was important, that everything that you've kind of been through with your company and all the one-sided stuff on social media, I think it's important for those who don't know operating agreements that, the yaks are being paid as per that agreement. And anyway, I know that's a difficult time.
Well, thank you, Joe. And I appreciate it. And I know you've gone through a similar partnership change with your firm, and you were very supportive during that process. I talked to you a couple times and you kind of shared with me some of your story. And it's just, you're going through that as the market is about to inflect. You're having, there's a lot going on in fall of 2023 that, we'll all look back and go, man, we survived some crazy stuff back then. But it is what it is, right? I've always been an optimistic, positive guy, and you're what defines you is not how you do during the good times. It's how you get through the bad times, right? And so here we are. We're getting through it, and yeah. So I appreciate you bringing it up, Joe. And yeah, there's 2023 has been an interesting year, to say the least.
Hey, I have a friend that just dropped in, and I'm going to say hi real quick. But let's talk about 2023. We had some big things. We had the NAR lawsuit.
Are you up on that, Tucker?
Yeah, I'm curious if you guys think it's going to actually change the landscape of anything, or if it's just a bunch of kind of white noise.
Man, I would say, Tucker, if I'm a betting man, which I actually am, so I know I'd say it's 50-50 here now. And that changes all the time, but yeah, I'd say it's 50-50. I think a few years from now, it's quite possible there's no buyer's agent compensation in the form that we see it.
If you think that down the line, though, right, like it gets really messy, because then it's like, okay, how many buyers are going to come out of pocket to pay a buyer's agent? Probably not that many. So then are they going to inflate sales prices to then pay it? And then are we going to have appraisal issue? There's a long line of like dominoes, if that actually goes that way, which is why I kind of don't think it will. Where do buyers go, right? Who do they use? They go directly to the selling agent.
They might go directly to the selling agent. Some might pay a little bit for a buyer's agent. Yeah.
You're going to have to hire somebody dedicated just to deal with people that have no idea what they're doing, that are calling your line, that want to buy a house, but they're going to act as buyer's agent, but you're going to have to pay them to just.
Yeah. It could change the business. Think back to, Tucker, think about it though. Think back to 2006, what the mortgage industry was like, and think about what it was like in 13, 12, right? It changed dramatically. There's nothing to say that an industry can't get changed in big way, right? Remember when we used to call appraisers and tell them what we needed on refis, and we picked our appraisers, and they were our buddies, and we'd take them out to drinks. And we remember we used to raise the rate and make more money. There was just so much that was different that all of a sudden changed. I've been through that, so it could happen here. It could happen here. Now I don't think it's gonna be all bad. I think it will affect some, those who. I think there could be winners and losers in that. You just made a good point. Like, you're going to need someone on your team to handle that. Well, maybe teams are going to be in a more advantageous spot, because you can go get a listing and say, look, Mr. Seller, The buyer's probably going to call us directly. I'll represent you. I've got a team member that's going to help them, and I can pay them, even though through the MLS we can't pay other buyers agents. I can pay my team members. So, I mean, there could be advantages to certain people, and it's kind of like COVID, right? Remember in COVID when we did these shows, we said there's winners and losers here, right? The restaurants are losing, golf is winning, real estate is winning, right? I don't know that everyone in this industry is going to be, have the same outcome. Yeah.
I think if it happens, having operating teams is going to become almost a necessity, which will probably shrink the number of agents there are, just because
it would definitely shrink the number of agents. It would definitely shrink the number of agents. And we were due for a shrinking. I think we got up to 1.5 million in the country. It could easily, if something big happens with this, we could easily lose a third to be down to 1 million.
It has shrunk already. And then the month of January is when NAR sticks everybody for the $690 fee. That's normally the tipping point. Like if you're not closing many deals, here you're feeding money into a profession, you're not making money. That's usually the catalyst that people are like, that's where they tap.
Yeah. And you could be right, Tucker. I mean, the days after the lawsuit came out, I thought it was imminently, maybe, because what we started hearing was copycat lawsuits. And I was almost wondering if NAR was just going to say, hey guys, we can't fight 100 lawsuits. Change this now. Now that's been a couple months ago. So, and it hasn't happened. So maybe a couple years from now, nothing changed. I don't know. But one thing I've said, and I believe firmly, is listing agents always have been king, but in the new world, if that did change, they'd even be more so. So just being a strong listing agent is a good, safe place to be, regardless of what happens in the future in this business. I think buyer's agents, could be okay, couldn't. I think it's a little more shaky and unknown. So
what's the old saying? This old agent used to tell me all the time. He goes, list to last, list to last.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's right. Listing is the only way you can go to, Hawaii for 14 days and have, 3 homes sell, right?
Yeah.
You can't show property when you're out of town. That's why listings are great. With chaos is opportunity. I don't
Absolutely.
know who said that. Tao, maybe.
Because so many people lose their heads. We saw that during COVID. So many people lose their heads. They spend so much energy fighting the change that they have no energy left to deal with the change and navigate the change, right? And we saw some of that with COVID. And you see it anytime there's a big change, right? With anything. And yeah, so
you guys have heard of the boiling the frog analogy, right?
Yeah.
You throw a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. You put a frog in cold water and turn the heat on, and it slowly boils to death because it doesn't realize it's happening. If you look at what Zillow is doing right now, they bought Follow Up Boss, which is a great reason not to use Follow Up Boss anymore. They bought Showing Time, and they also purchased one other statistic gathering thing. I forgot what it was, but this is going to be like a Redfin-esque. If these lawsuits and copycat lawsuits happen, they're going to come out with like, hey, hire us as a buyer agent. We have a flat fee of $5,000, and we will write your offer for you, negotiate repairs, and it will close. And on $1 million house, normally that's in the $25,000 range, $30,000, $22,500, whatever the BAC is. But I think there's an opportunity for these companies to say, call our people and we'll go write it for you, just like an attorney will. And the cost is going to be $5,000 instead of what a normal BAC, or not normal, what a competitive BAC normally is. I think that's coming. I really do.
That sounds like the most logical progression, I guess, of everything we've kind of thrown out here. I don't think it'll disappear. So how does it kind of become something that it's palatable to most people? That seems like the version that probably is it.
Yeah. And let me throw this at you, Tucker, because you know this as well as anyone, because you're a professional seller. In the past I don't know how much you're selling these days, but you've always been a professional seller, meaning you build houses and you're always a seller. In my world, I deal a lot of resale people. They're just a one and done seller every 10 years. You were selling every day. So you'd get this well. How frustrating for you, say you've got a property, it's listed at $1 million, and some buyer's agent brings you an 850 offer, and they're going to get the exact same commission percentage wise as somebody that brought you $1 million offer, right? So there must be an element of you that goes, man, it sure would be nice when that buyer's agent writes that offer, if at that point it's negotiable how much I get to pay them. Instead of the BAC was predetermined, whoever brings the offer, regardless of how talented, how good they are, how bad they are, how poorly the offer is written, how nice of an offer it is, or how insulting of an offer it is. Wouldn't it be nice if that offer comes in, they go, will you please pay me, Tucker, on my 850 offer 2.5%? And you go, I'll counter your 850 offer, and I'm countering you up, but I'm also countering down your BAC because I don't like you, because you're kind of a jerk and you're trying to beat me up. So that could be, I can see where maybe that would be a model that made sense in the future. Maybe there is a BAC, but it's negotiable at the time of the offer. There's another component to how that could shake up, right?
I mean, I know people get super offended whenever you bring that up, because I've brought it up from, before, when people bring, a less than stellar offer, let's call it price wise, without anything other than their own justification, which is arbitrary, right? That was a very sensitive topic for a long, long time.
Oh, so it wasn't a topic you could have because the BAC was established
it became
before.
Like, World War III. So that might happen as well.
Maybe. Yeah. So,
but on the flip
side, it'll be interesting.
If people brought you an amazing offer and it was over list and easy clients, sometimes you paid them a bonus, right? Because they did their job.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What else is on the agenda, Joe?
Oh, okay. So to our listeners and subscribers, we love and appreciate you. We love talking with people who are not afraid of learning. And I was just looking at some of the last podcasts, and I want to go through and just rattle off like 2023's fire list of rock star people. We started the year with our market being a little, turbulent, and we had Dill Ward, and the headline is "The Market's Between Your Ears." Whatever you hear about rates and all this other stuff, forget it. Just put your head down, do what you do, and ignore all the chatter and the pity parties and the, stitch and bitch sessions that everybody wants, to be the victim. Just do your work, plow forward. And I love her attitude. We also very timely had Jeff Wyron and Jeremy Rogers talk about the new Oregon Realtor forms on the exact day those forms were released. We had them on the podcast live in Facebook, and they were unpacking and why it's better. And we asked them, Steve, you remember, we didn't pull any punches. It's like, why do you have another set of forms? Why didn't you make the first ones better? Why are yours better than the other ones? Why should we use yours? We held their feet to the fire. They answered every single one of them. It hasn't really taken off, though. And I think the reason for that is because everyone already fluently knows one set of forms.
And I believe them. I think they're a better form, but the market just, realtors don't like change, and people in general don't like change, and realtors especially. I think they have a better form, but it just hasn't to date, taken off, and it is what it is. Yeah.
I think it was well thought out, and I think they had some great provisions that are better, but you can only communicate in the language that other people understand. Well, and they know OREF inside and out.
Didn't you use the analogy of you never want to be the first person to have a fax machine? Because who are you going to fax? I mean, correct. That's kind of the conundrum that it's been, is like, no one wants to be the first person to really try to use those forms, because whoever you send them to is like, what's this? This is Chinese. Send me on the one I know. So short of some massive event that makes everybody have to use them all at once, which I don't know how you manipulate that, then it's just challenging. Yeah. Yep. And
then, so after the forms thing, we had repeat guest Eric Post talking about Whoosy. 2023 was all about AI,
intelligence. Right? Oh my gosh.
AI is going to take over the world, and it's going to replace jobs and artists and songwriters and paralegals. It's I like Eric. We've had him on a few times, and that guy's always got his fingers in something. And he's got that brain that's kind of out there. And it was
I think when years
great
from now,
podcast.
we will look back at 2023 as being the year of artificial intelligence, AI. I mean, it became the buzzword. If you pay attention to the CNBC and the business world, every earnings call, whether you made Subway sandwiches as your product or you were financial investments or cars, everybody, their stock would pop if they said, yeah, we're using AI. I mean, it just became the buzzword. It reminded me this year a lot of what cryptocurrency was, a few years back, right? Where everybody was jumping on the crypto bandwagon, some way, shape, or form, thought it was going to change everything. That's what artificial intelligence was this year. And it's been interesting. So,
and then we had Scott Fauser with House Happy, which was enlightening because Scott's brilliant. He's a really smart guy. And, I've known him for a long time, and everything he touches is amazing. House Happy is terrific. And I was a little shocked, as big as they are, so many people have never heard of them before, to solve all of your real estate problems. If you need any kind of a service or contractor or anything, they do all the vetting, and you call someone and they're perfect. We then went into There's Enough Real Estate for Everybody with Justin Stoddard with Pro Insight. He's always good. He's a motivational speaker. He's a coach. He's all kinds of things. That was a spirited thing. And then we had Ezra Hammer.
Which one was that one? Say that one again, Joe. I'm sorry. I looked away for a second.
Justin Stoddard.
Yeah. We had Justin back on. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Justin's been a repeat guest. Awesome.
Always a great almost speaker. Like the new Joe Fustolo. I mean, he's just a solid repeat guest that brings a lot of good value. I like Justin. Yeah.
And then, so we had Ezra Hammer on again, and Jeremy Housley of Jordan Ramis Attorneys. And we talked about zoning. It was kind of a sleeper because, how exciting is zoning? Really? It's not. But was it important, and was it valuable? I mean, look, are they changing codes that you can't have Northwest Natural Gas in a house anymore in new construction? That's a big deal. I mean, so anyway, it probably not the most flashiest and sexy, but it was a great podcast. And then Anthony Taylor Weber of, Outdoor Living Spaces, where he makes his whole business built on she sheds, basically, or he sheds, or they
Did
shed.
you listen to that one, Tucker? If you didn't get a chance, you should check that one
episode
out.
Yeah, I did not.
He's got an interesting business model.
I think I listened to a little bit of it because I'm just curious. Didn't he have one of them at the Street of Dreams or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you go to that?
No, I didn't. It went on the last night I was in town and just packing and all that. So
interesting business model. He's really leaned into the, prefab, build it in your backyard. It categorized as a shed, but it's really living space, and it's affordable. He's got it down. He's doing well with it, and I think he's going into other markets with it. It's an interesting model, and he was quite a talker. He's a natural podcaster. He does his own podcast, great. And I think I could have
sat that one. I could have sat that one out between you two. I could have just tuned in and watched.
Yeah.
And I want to say the name of his company, Steve. Is it Outdoor
Office? Yeah.
Outdoor Office.
Yeah.
Finally, the last one, we had Rob Levy. We unpacked the NAR debacle and what that might mean to us. And what's nice about Rob, he's been a broker for 35 years, very knowledgeable, lived through 4 recessions. He not only sells real estate at a high level, I think he's licensed in 3 states. And he and Dirk Zeller also own, 60 rentals each, something to that effect. And those guys together do something that I hear from realtors all the time, and it's passive income. How to buy doors and start getting paid, and you build up those doors, and that number you get paid monthly grows, 10 grand a month and 20 grand a month and whatever it may be. And then by the time you check out and say, I'm going to be a full-time fisherman or water skier or whatever the hell it is you're doing, you're getting this passive income. These guys talk about that. And we promised Rob that we would have those two on doing their segment where they fly around the United States talking about how they invest. And I really want them on for my own knowledge, but I think everybody will benefit from that. So in 2024, sometime in the first or second quarter, we'll have them both on, and that'll be a great show as well.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one too. Yeah,
you've had some great guests this year. Great shows. So,
hey, one of the things I meant to give you this plug too, Tucker. One of the things you did and said when you were leaving the area and you were phasing out of the podcast, to our listeners, Tucker didn't sell the podcast. He didn't try to profit from it. He didn't try to maneuver anything. He just said, guys, I want to set you up for success. And ultimately I want to see the podcast live on and thrive. And congratulations, you were able to do that, Tucker. So thank you. We appreciate that handoff, and yeah, it's doing well, and we see many more years to come. Right, Joe?
It's a great brand. And you guys have taken the torch and ran with it. You've even added more tech than I ever could have to it, which is great. It's grown. So it's awesome to see, honestly. I'm happy to have done it, and I'm even happier to know that you guys kind of continued with it and kind of made it your own as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know the exact numbers, but when we were talking to the people who edit it and post it, everywhere you listen to podcasts, they post it. And I remember some time ago, we had like 160,000 downloads, but with the Masters group and us getting more known, I would say we're probably at like 200,000 downloads would be my prediction. And it's hard to track because we're on every platform. We're on 6 different platforms. We also have a YouTube station, which is a video and audio.
And you can watch it in Masters. You can watch it in Masters. And a lot of times in Masters, I remember during the some of our most watched shows were during the early days of COVID. I remember when we had Randy on and Justin on and Terry on, and what the heck is going on, and we would get 1,000 views just on the video in Masters. That's not even downloading the podcast, right? So yeah, I mean, there are different, like you said, Joe, there's different ways. A lot of times people ask me, well, how many people watch your podcast? Well, we don't know necessarily because there's different ways to consume it, right? So, but it's a lot. It's a lot, and we get a lot of great feedback. And one of the other things that's magic about it, Tucker, we were talking about, is we don't have an agenda. Joe and I aren't actively trying to gain anything from this podcast. We're trying to give on this podcast. We're trying to help people, and that's how you set it up too. It's always been that way. Remember over the years, how many times do people approach us still, Joe and Tucker, back when you were around? Oh, can I be on your podcast? I want to sell this or that, or promote this or that, and that's not what the podcast is about, right? It's about giving value and being a good platform to help our industry, just like Masters in real estate is.
It's, so Masters and the podcast, they're 2 full-time unpaid jobs. And not only are they unpaid, they cost money and time.
Yeah.
And we're doing this to kind of lift everybody up by their bootstraps. And, I have 2 other paid jobs. But I think this is very valuable because, you can listen to our podcast and be a little smarter about the economy and what's coming down the pipeline. Or you can listen to, Joe Rogan, where they just laugh all the time and talk about smoking pot and everything they talk about, which doesn't have any value other than just entertainment. And if this could help you maybe be better, more collaborative, more knowledgeable, more techie, more ethical, more cooperative, all of those things translate to being more profitable and easier to work with, because we will end up working together eventually. So,
well, and
that's what motivates us.
Yeah, what both of these platforms do, the podcast and Masters in Real Estate, is they unite our industry, right? We're not all lone wolves trying to figure out what's this new NAR lawsuit, what are the implications of it, or what's the market doing. We're able to communicate with each other, even if we're in different companies, even if we're in different markets, even if somebody's in Bend, they can talk to someone in the metro area, or, Seattle and all the region, right, is where both of these kind of have a following. So they serve a very valuable purpose in giving a united voice to our industry. And we can bring on guests to help with that on the podcast. But, in Masters, anyone can jump in and communicate that way. So Okay. Well,
Okay.
hey, I think speaking of which, I think this is one of our longest podcasts. And I know that, by the way, because we were going through it the other day with a consultant that we work with. And they were saying, yeah, your longest one ever has been 90 minutes. And I think we're about 93 minutes right now.
Did you think it was going to be shorter with the three of us?
Yeah.
There was a lot to catch up with Tucker on. So
Yeah, I know Tucker wants to go out there wakeboarding. He's getting fidgety. So
Actually, my
Tucker,
crazy son just got dropped off at the office here. So he's breaking something out there.
Tucker, next time you come, let's go out to my country club and the three of us, and let's play some golf at Twalton Country Club. And by the way, yes, I am a lot better than you. I'm a 9.3 handicap now, and I want to actually kick your butt. I want to kick your butt at something. And
yeah, you probably will. I mean, it depends on the day. You know, I've been known to eagle a par 5 or 2 in my day, but you're definitely overall. So
yeah, I love it. Okay.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Washington's #1 show for cutting-edge real estate discussions. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the members of Masters in Real Estate, a private and exclusive Facebook group, and the #1 source for all real estate topics. Thanks for being there, gang. I love you. Finally, I want to thank our faithful listeners. Without an audience, we're just two guys talking to each other. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so the new episodes automatically come to you. Make it great.